Hello and welcome to the channel. This is a new video covering React Native and Supabase. For those who don't know, as it says here, Supabase is an open source Firebase alternative. It's a pretty awesome tool. I've done a couple of videos on using it on multiple platforms. The best way to think about it is that it gives you a database, storage, authentication, all hosted in the cloud. For those who are more comfortable with SQL type database, this is definitely the right solution for you as opposed to Firebase that uses a document store. The pricing is pretty reasonable. As you can see, you can get started pretty much for nothing. Also, when you move to Pro, it's not too expensive. I definitely think it's something that if you are more comfortable with SQL, you might want to take a look at this. The documentation is pretty awesome. This is kind of some of the data from the application that we're going to walk through, but what I want to show you, which I think is pretty cool, is it kind of lays out based on your tables how to kind of create a connection to it. And then as you click through on your specific tables in this application, we have a list of Tesla chargers. It kind of shows you how to kind of select them, find them, and all this code you can just cut and paste, drop right in. I don't really need to execute any SQL. It's all API based. But if you do want to get down and dirty, you can still, that's not the report's not what I want, you can still get here into the SQL editor and actually run specific scripts against your database here, which I think is pretty cool. It also supports storage, so you can upload images. And overall, it's a pretty full service solution. Like I said, it does support authentication also. What we're going to do in this application, actually not in this application, well, yes, what we're going to do in this application also in this video is we're going to just show the basic CRUD, so the ability to create objects and read objects, also relationships between objects, because what we have here is we have Tesla Supercharger Locations, which is what we have in the list here, which has some attributes associated to it. And then you can plot it on a map, the location of it, and then we have additional items like services, so what services are available at this location. You can get a list of the services. You can add new services with the Modal dialog. You can add notes about a specific location. You can check into a specific location. And I think that's pretty much what we're going to do in the video. All the source code will be provided for you. And so if this is something you think will be beneficial, please make sure you like, subscribe, and watch the video. Last thing is I want to make sure I cover all the tech that we're using. So we're using Supabase. We're using, this is React Native. This app was built with Expo. And to quickly get a UI together, we're using React Native Paper, which I think is a pretty cool tool, pretty lightweight, and helps you get the basics accomplished. All right, so let's get to the code. Okay, welcome back, and let's start getting into some of the code. Before we get into the code, let's talk about some of the things that we're using here in this application. So here in the application, we are using React Native Paper for the UI. I didn't want to spend a bunch of time dealing with Flex and boxes and all this other crap to get a decent UI together, so I use React Native Paper. It's pretty cool. It gets the basics done. I'm definitely not a pro, but I'm definitely not a pro at it. This is really the first time I've used it, but please take a look at it. And then, of course, I'm using React Navigation to kind of get the navigation going in the application. Great documentation here. I pretty much cut and pasted the documentation and then modified to get things going how I needed it to go. And then, of course, we are using Supabase. And here is the back end of the database that I'm using. I went back and forth on, am I going to kind of walk through this with you, or am I just going to kind of show you what I did? And I think I'm just going to show you what I did. If folks want to see more, I can kind of insert another video that kind of walks you through the actual steps of how I actually created the database. But like I said, there's tons of videos that cover that already. The scripts that I use for the database are here. So let me well, first let's do this. Let's bring over this. I found this cool tool which generates a schema, which kind of lays out what we have. So let's pull that over. Hopefully this is big enough for everyone to see. Let's see if I can, there you go, I can make it bigger. So I have my chargers, and then clearly, of course, everything is connected to the chargers. We have check-ins that are connected to the specific charger. We have notes that are connected to the specific charger, and we have services that are connected to a specific charger. The way that I added all my tables to the database are here. I will include these scripts in the. Let me zoom this in a bit too, so it makes it a little bit easier to see. Here's my chargers table that has been created. You can see the way that I'm connecting them all are through these references, and so this charger ID references the specific charger that the node is associated with. I'm taking the same approach here with the check-ins. Charger ID maps back to the charger, services, and then towards the end, I think I'm going back and forth. We'll see as the video progresses when I'm going to integrate authentication. And when I integrate authentication, we want to store additional information on the user who's logged in. And so this will be a profiles table that will be connected to the specific user. Basically, what I'll do is insert the record into the profiles table with the same ID that I get from the Supabase authentication user table. So that's how we'll kind of connect everything together. The way that I add, let's switch back to Supabase for a minute. The way that I created all of my tables is down here. If we go to Supabase, not in the API here, on this SQL editor, you have this, where is it? SQL snippets, create table. And so you just get this blank screen right here. And what you can do is, so for example, to create my chargers, I can just copy, paste my script in. Let's say this is chargers 2, since I don't really want to do anything with it. And then you just click run. It ran successfully. So now if I go back to my tables, you can see I have my chargers 2 table, which just got inserted into the database. And so now I can start to insert rows. So you can just click here. You get this pretty cool UI that pops up, and you can start to add your values. These are all optional, but you probably need data in them. So we have our Wi-Fi Latin long, which is part of the map, which will be a later video. We'll integrate a map. What state we are in, that's what this value is right here. Description, this is the descriptive text right here. And then the name. So let's cancel this. And we don't need this table here, so let's just delete this table. Delete this table. I've put some kind of placeholder data in here. That's not what you're seeing here. This is hard-coded data because the purpose of this video is to integrate everything for you. But this is just some dummy data so that when we first start it up, we can start to pull some data back. And then we'll implement the add function to show you how to actually add some data to the database. But this is what we have for Supabase. You saw how easy it was for me to kind of create the table. You saw how easy it is to enter data. And like I said, tons of videos on how to set this up. But if enough people want it, I'll add this video also. So that's Supabase. So I covered the tools that we're using. We covered React Paper. We covered React Navigation. The last thing is Expo. This app was created with Expo. That's what I'm using for everything here. Once again, tons of video on Expo. I'll also include a link on it below, but all the source code will be provided with you also. So now let's kind of just start to walk through the scaffolding of this code that we have here to make this application work. So let's see if we can switch over to VS Code. And we'll just start at the top. So let's go to F.js. So this is the Supabase code that I will be integrating later to support authentication. So I'm not really going to cover that right now. But what I've done in my application is we have our top level navigation container. And then our navigation container will either show the home screen stack or the authentication screen stack based on if the user is authenticated or not. What I've done is I've just set authentication to true by default. So let's set it to false so you can see what we get. If I set that to false, you can see we get our login UI, which we will enter an email and a password. And then you click login to login, or you can click create account, which is where you enter email first, last, password. This information matches what we were talking about in the profile table, and so we can cover that later. So let's hit cancel. So that's the login. That's what's happening here. But let's take a look at the stacks now. So let's take a look at the auth screen stack. So if we go to the auth screen stack, we have our auth screen stack. And our auth screen stack basically has 2 screens. It has our login screen, and it has our create account screen. This, like I said, most of this code is copied directly from Navigation. Example on Authentication, I've just kind of modified it for my purposes, for my screens. And so what we have a stack screen for each one of the screens that are included in the stack. We have our component, which is a login screen, which I'll cover in a bit. And then we have specific options that we're passing in. And so what I'm saying here is, actually, it's kind of weird. I don't think I need the title here since I'm hiding my header. So this says the header is shown as false. And then this is the animation for replace as I'm kind of moving my screens in and out. Once again, I just copied this directly from the React Navigation documentation. Then this is our create account screen. If we look at kind of how they're being used, when we first come in to this authentication stack, the default screen is by default, it's going to end up showing the first one, which is login. And so my login screen will be shown. So let's scroll up and take a look at what my login screen is. So I'm not using my left content anymore. So let's kind of just cut that out of there. All right, so this is my login screen. We are using some styling, but basically it's just this React paper, a component, card component that's rendering the UI. Right now, I'm just rendering the UI. I'm not capturing any data, but we have our two input fields, email and password. We have our login and log out. Then we use navigate to get to the create account screen, which is also inside of this folder. Inside of this file. I didn't want to create too many files for the purposes of this example, be bouncing back and forth, so I just kind of shoved it all in here. In the end, I'll probably refactor it out, but for now, create account, pretty much exact same as login. I've used the React Navigation paper component, card component once again, and just kind of listed all the fields here. I'm not going to go too much in detail in this until we actually start to add Supabase to it, but I just want to kind of show you what we have for the screen. And so that's the AuthStack. And so now if I go back and set this auth to true, this is if we were logged in, we go down the HomeStack. There's a lot of stuff here, but I'll try to go through it as slowly as I can, and also we do have the source code. So let's go to my HomeStack, and see we got a bunch of screens in here. So let's get down to my HomeStack. So my HomeStack, we have this main screen, which is charging locations. We have the locations detail screen, which is when I click on more. And then we have screens for each one of these. So we have screens for services, we have screens for notes, and we have screens for check-ins. That's what we have. That's what all this code is right here. And so that lays that out. And did I miss anything else in this stack? Nope, that's pretty much it for the home stack. The screens are very similar. Once again, I just use the card component because it's just easier to stick with one component for the purpose of what I'm saying. Right now, what am I doing here? I'm also utilizing flat list. So with flat list, you pass it the data you want to render. You pass a function in that renders each data element. And so what I've done here is I have this function called, where is it? Item, and it takes in all the properties for each one of the chargers, and then I just render in the card title. And so the flat list just loops through all of it. This is the same pattern you're going to see in all of these screens. So when I list the services, when I list notes, and when I list check-ins, it's the same idea. We have a flat list, we pass in some data, and right now this is just dummy data that I'm passing in. We have a render, which kind of renders the cards, and it just loops through them. Is there any, one last thing. Let's talk about the Modal UI that were implemented. So where is it? So here on my home screen, right here, you can see we have this modal, this React Native modal. And this gets called when we click the add button, which is, let's look at this right up here. So we are modifying what's happening in our header once it's being laid out, and we set this button to the right side here, and it has a state variable called setModal. When setModal is true, it will trigger a re-render, which will then force this modal to show its content, which is a component called add modal. So let's click on that. And then here's a modal. So now let's look at this add modal. And so add modal, once again, this just using the React Paper card component. There's no magic here. This is just normal text fields that I'm showing. I have not integrated capturing the data from the fields to save to the database. That's the code that we'll do together. I really just wanted to show you the UI, because if I kind of try to type this all out in the middle of a video, it would run for hours and hours, and that's not really what I wanted to accomplish. So I think I've now covered all of the key UI components. We covered our main page, our more page, our services, and then we covered the kind of authentication flow. So that's it for kind of what we've done with the UI. And I think now let's get to integrating some Supabase into this application and see what we got. All right, let's get ready for the next part. Okay, now let's integrate Supabase. We've kind of walked through the application. It's time to get dirty, get our hands dirty. And so Supabase is pretty awesome. It tells you how to get everything set up here. We click over here on this API docs button, and it kind of lays out how you want to integrate Supabase into your application. We've already installed Supabase. I did it with Yarn, so we're using Yarn in this project. But what I want to do here is just copy all this code here to initialize Supabase client in the project. I'm going to copy this. We're going to switch over into our source code. Down here at the top level, I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it Supabase client. Did I already create the file? Let's see. I already did create the file. So let's put the code inside the file. So let's paste the code inside the file. This is our library. We need our actual Supabase key. I'm going to use the key from my current project. Please don't use my key. I will kind of pause the video and paste it in, but don't try to figure out what it is. All right. So we're going to call this Supabase client. And we're going to return this so I can access it outside of here. So we're going to say export Supabase client. Then the last thing I need is my key. So let's save this. I have no errors, but I need my key. So let's get my key back from Supabase. And where is my key? Your API key is up here, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, API. So you go to your settings and then to API, and that's where you find your key. I'm going to block this part out. Actually, I can hide it because it's not showing the whole thing, but that's where I'm copying my key from. And then let's go back to my code, and then I'll just paste my key in here. And that's the key, and let's make sure I got no errors. Run this, and it looks like I have a client. So now let's actually start to do some queries. And if we take a look here, we can go back to Supabase documentation, back down here, and we can click up here on our tables and views, and we're working with a charger specifically. We want to replace our fake data here and use the real charger data here. So I clicked on chargers, and here it kind of gives you a description of all the fields and everything, but here it kind of lays out queries of how to get the data. So we want to select all. So read all rows, and I'm just going to copy this. I should just copy it, go back to my code, and inside here, I'm going to export functions from here. So we're going to create a function get all chargers. And then we're going to go up here and add it. Get all chargers, and we're just going to paste this code in. And we are not really going to worry too much about error checking and all that other stuff right now. We just want to kind of show you how easy it is to get this up and running quickly. So we're going to return chargers an error. Just put this up here, just give us a little bit of space. And down here I have get all chargers returned. So now I should be able to access this function from any place where I import Supabase client. So let's go back to my HomeStack, and let's go up to the top in my HomeStack page, and we're going to import get all chargers. So now we have that set up, and then we want to load the chargers when this home page component mounts. So let's go find my detail screen, here's my add modal, and here's my home screen. And let's do our use effect down here. We can't make asynchronous calls in here, so let's add another function up top. We can do it, there's a hack, but let's just do it here to make it clearer. So load all chargers, and we're gonna make this call async. Let's move this back up so it's easy to see. We are going to make our call. So const get our data back from our get all chargers call. And this is async, so we got to put our await in front, await, and this is going to give us back chargers and error. And like I said, we're not going to mess with errors right now, but what we want to do is we want to set charger data, and we're going to set chargers, our GRS with that. And then now we need a local state variable to manage that. So let's go up top here. Charger data. I think it's set charger data. Use state. We're going to initialize it at empty. And we're going to set it right here. And then inside of here, we're going to call load all chargers. And then the last change we need to do is inside of our flat list here, we want to actually use our charger data and not the fake data anymore. So let's call it charger data. And let's run it. Actually, I can see the error right there. So inside my Supabase client, await, this needs to be async, A, S, Y, and C. And okay. Oh, I forgot again this async storage option that's needed on here to work in React Native. What is it called? Local storage, and then you need to load this async storage lib. I will include a link below to explain kind of why you need to do this. There was an error that I found when I first started using this, and I will link to it. But you will have all the source code. This is what you need to do to make this work. You need to import this async storage. So let's put this on here. And why is this not? Oh, because this is an option. So let's put this options around this, around there. And we're getting closer. Await Supabase from Supabase. Oh, there's no Supabase anymore. There's only Supabase client. So let's replace that. And we get our record. And so let's just verify what we have in our database. So if we go back to Supabase and we go up and we look at our tables and we look at chargers, we can see I have my New Jersey location 1, and here's all my data. We might, like I said, we might do maps later, but we have our location, state, description, stall, and additional metadata on the information. Let's use the real big words. New Jersey. Why is it not saving that? Let me just try this approach. Let's expand it. And then now let's edit it. So, and save. So we get the location stored here. This is really strange. Edit row. I guess I have to go in and edit it. So we have the on the expressway, comma, you don't need to exit. Save. Okay, and so we're getting our data from here. Here's our 2 records, and they're showing up here. What the next step we want to do is we're going to show how we can integrate this modal to actually save the data into the table and have it get updated. And then the next step will be to integrate these more buttons, which I'm not sure why they're not active, so that when you click on them, it'll take you to the additional information around each one of the entries. All right, so that's what we're going to cover in the next part. Let's just fix one. So the error we had at the end of the last video when the more button wasn't working, it was because I didn't set this dependency right here on use effect. So every screen render, it was calling load all charges, and it was just causing a bunch of re-renders, which wouldn't allow me to click the more button. So I've added the empty brackets, which means only run this at startup, and now everything's working fine. So now let's hop to what we want to do is so we did a query at all of these, but when I click the more button, I only want to get the specific item that I clicked on, because that will then give me the additional values that I need for services, notes, and check-ins, because there's a relationship between the top-level charger and the services table, the notes table, and the check-ins table. And the way that we can handle that is, let's first go back to our Supabase client, and we're going to start here. And what we want to do is we're going to add a new function very similar to get all chargers, but we just want to get one charger. And when we get that one charger, we're going to need the ID for the specific charger that we want. And so we're going to get a charger. We're going to need a charger by ID. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to pretty much do exactly what we did here, except that we're going to only get the one using the ID. So we're going to say get all chargers. We're going to say select everything, but we're just going to say where it equals the ID that is passed in. So that should only get us the one that we want. The other thing that we want to do here is, remember how I said that the services and the notes and the check-ins had a relationship with the top-level charger? We can kind of change this query to do a join. And so the way you do that is you use these backticks to construct the query. So let's put this in here. And so what this says is, get me all the chargers, then get me the notes that are related, get me the services that are related, and the check-ins that are related, and make sure the ID matches the specific ID. And so that's what this says. And then we're going to say that the data that comes back is just a charger. We just want to return a charger, just a charger. And also remember that this returns an array. So we need to say charger at 0. So just give me back the first one. And since it doesn't like that, what we're going to do is we're going to say change this to data. And we're going to take this data element. We're going to say, there you go. So now get charger by ID is going to return a charger and an error if any error existed. So now let's use this in our screen. So let's go back to our HomeStack, and this is our load all chargers. So this is the main ones. What we want to do is, first of all, we need to pass the ID when we click the more button. So let's go down to our more button, and it's going to be in our render. So right here on the more. And so with the navigator, you can pass parameters. And let's see, I got that up here somewhere. Passing parameters on routes. And so you can pull them off. And the way you do it is you just pass an object with the parameters you want sent over. So let's go back to our code. And on detail, we are going to pass, so it's very clear, we're going to just say charger ID is going to be the ID. And so that means that we need to get the ID passed into us. So the ID comes along with the item, so we'll add it here. Add the ID there. Now we can pass the ID over. And now let's go to our, if we look back down our stack, we can see on our navigation stack, we have our detail page. And that's our detail screen. So let's go to our detail screen. Let's add route to that. Bad typing. And then remember, let's go back one more time. You pull the parameters off with this route params. So let's just copy this to make sure we get it right. And we're going to go on our detail screen. We're going to say route params, but there's only one param that we want, and it's charger ID. So now we have the charger ID. And then what we're going to do is we're going to kind of load it in the same way we loaded the data on the previous page. And so we can say the use effect, and this time the dependency will be if the charger ID changes, then we want to run this code in here. Put that comma in. let's see, how did we do it on the home screen? Let's go down to the home screen. Well, we need some place to hold our data, but what we did is we created this other function, which we called them inside. But I'm going to show you a different approach, which is we can just take the async function like this, and this is sometimes what I do when I get lazy, is you can just wrap this like so. And this will call this function for us at startup. And we don't want to get all chargers. We want to get charger. Is it get charger by ID? Yes, get chargr by ID. Let's see, did I export that? So let's go back. I did not, so let's copy that, put that down here so that it gets exported, and go back to my HomeStack. Then let's see if I can auto import this guy. Get charger by ID. It auto imported it, so now we have it there. And remember, this returns a charger, not charger, so it returns a charger. And then we want to set charger data. And so we need a so let's just copy again from the HomeStack. It's just easier. So we're going to get charger data, and we're going to set it in our detail screen. So set charger data, and this is a charger, not chargers. Okay, so well, let's do the last piece. So just to make sure we know we have something, let's go in here and just render the name of the charger. So we can go in here and we can say charger data dot name. And sorry, this is an object that we're getting passed in. Let's see what we get. Possible unhandled exception. So what did it not like? So get charger. Oh, I didn't pass my ID here. So let's take my charger ID and pass it in. And you can see I'm getting the name back. So let's do this one. So this means I'm getting my object, and so my object should have the rest of the data I need. And let's start with services. So if we go back to our database, you can see that we have check-ins, we have notes, and we have services that have relationships based on their charger ID. This is the data that's getting sent back to us. So let's just kind of show you in the debugger what's happening. So if I go here and let's set a breakpoint here and we run this, we should be in a debugger now. And you can see at my breakpoint I have my charger, and if I look at my charger object, you can see we have the additional objects that we need. We have our check-ins, we have our notes, this one has no notes, and then we have our services. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pass these objects to each one of these individual pages when we need to. So let's remove this debugger, and let's start with services. So right now when I press on services and I load, this is all dummy data. And we can go down and take a look at my buttons, each one, which is in, let's give us some more room inside of each one of these cards. So we look at our notes detail. When I click the button, I'm navigating to the notes detail page. So let's use the same approach and just do this and say notes. We're going to pass notes, and notes are coming from my object, which is my charger object. No, sorry. Charger data. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pass charger data notes. And notes is a bad one because I remember we don't have notes in both of them. So let's take this same approach and do it up here with services, because we know we have services on all of them. So let's go to our services detail. And instead of notes, this one we're passing in services. And it's charger data dot services services. And so now let's try this out on services. So let's go to our services screen, and I've added those to this more screen file because the other file was getting crazy. So let's go to our services. So here's our services detail screen. It renders an item, services item, then it's got this flat list, and right now it's taking raw data. But what we're going to do is we're going to use the data that gets passed in, and we're going to take the same approach that we used here in passing parameters on routes. So I can just pull the route param and use that and actually just render it. So let's copy that. Let's see if I can copy this again. And go back over to my code, and inside of my services detail screen, we're going to get a route param called services. And if I get that route param, what's going on? Oh, I need to make sure I am putting route in here. So let's add route. Then I get my services, and then let's remove the dummy service and put real services in. And let's see what we get. And so we're getting back pretzels and Starbucks. And so the way we know this is real data, if I switch back to my Delaware REST area and look at services, I'm getting a different set of services. So we know our data is actually being loaded in. So let's just show it one more time with the notes and the check. Well, the notes, we haven't done the UI. I should have used that for a later exercise. But let's get real check-ins added in. We can take the same approach. So we know we need to pass in route. We are going to need to get the route params, and we'll just do what we do here. We're going to just check-ins, check INS, define our real check-ins down here. And then the last thing that we need to do is go back to our HomeStack and make sure that when we call check-ins, we're passing them over correctly. So let's go down to check-ins detail. At our option, remember we call this check-ins. And then, but in our charger data, it is called check-ins, I believe. Let's take a quick look back at our database, and we can see, yes, it's called check-ins. All right, so now let's see if that worked. So this, we have a check-in with no comment, and we have a check-in with not busy in the morning. So there's our not busy in the morning. There's our no comment, and that's for charger 2, which is the Delaware REST area. Then now for charger 1, we get our services, and then we get our check-ins. And so that's what we wanted to do. That's what we pulled the data. The big thing here was taking advantage, look at our, not our API, but our scripts that we had. And if we look at how we created, not that one, do I have the snippets here? Yeah, we created the relationships here between all these nodes. It allowed us to kind of pull that data in that top level query that we have here inside of our Supabase client, where we're kind of doing this join to get the notes and pull all the data back. So then we have all the data once you reach this main detail screen, and then you can pass into specific collections to each one of the separate items. This is the approach I'm using. You might want to call them independently when you click on the link and load them, but you now know both ways to do it. And so now we showed how we're reading the data. Let's kind of show how you can actually add a location. Since we already have this form created, then maybe we will try to add a location here on, show the ability of how you can add services. So that's what we're going to do in the next video. We've done the read, now let's do the write to Supabase. Okay, now it's about time to start getting into adding chargers to the system. We've showed how to kind of read data. Let's show how to add data. We're going to modify our modal We're going to modify our modal form here. Let's get this out of there because I don't know why I have two of those. And the idea is we'll enter some data, we'll save some data, show up in Supabase. Pretty straightforward. I'll show you how simple this is. All right, so let's get to our code. Here is my project. We're going to go to our HomeStack and we're going to go to our form. Sorry, Modal. Let's just find Modal. It's the quickest, and here we are at Add Modal. Let's get this extra power thing out of here first. So that's all we need. And what we want to do is just capture the text, package it up, and throw it back to the other side when the user actually closes the modal. So first, let's start by, we could use something like React Hook Form here, but I'm going to try and keep it simple, and we're just going to use a bunch of useState. Just create some state variables to keep track of the input fields. This is a lot of just cut and paste code, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to kind of cut and paste and drop it in and kind of explain it along the way. So here's all of the fields that we have. We're going to keep track of each one of them. And then on success, we're going to send them back to the other side. So now let's go down and start adding them to each one of them. So right here, for example, we have our name field. And in the name field, we want to be able to set the value when the text changes, and we also want to set the value to match the field. So we could go in, let's start here. Let's get this out. We could do something like that, where we will get the value, set the value, and then show it up here again on name. And we're just going to kind of repeat the same process for the rest of these. So let's go down and we'll get our state, because actually state I just noticed is missing, so let's just drop state in there because you want to keep track of what state the we want to keep track of what state the charger is in. So let's add a state in here. Looks like I'm missing a little something from that cut and paste. So we add state in, same approach here. You can see with the on-change text. Then let's just finish up the rest of these really quickly. Description, and then stalls, and then our power, which is our kilowatts. For those of you who don't know, for Tesla, the higher the kilowatt charge, the faster it's going to charge. So where's that here? And I think that kilowatts. Well, this is my wrapper around this UI element. So has Wi-Fi. For the has Wi-Fi, we're just tracking it with the checked. You guys get the idea of what we're doing here. And checked, unchecked, that's already set. We're going to change what's happening here in the on-close, because if you cancel, we don't care. So we could just return null. But if you actually have some data, we want to capture all the data and pass it back. So we're going to add a new function here on save data. Let's go up to the top and put that in. Data, and here, this is where we'll gather up all of the state variables, package them, and then do the on-close, which is necessary to shut everything down. So the idea here is we just wrap all of our values in the on-close and send it back instead of a null. So here you can see we're getting all the values that we need. And also the other thing we're doing is we're making sure we're setting the property named in this key value pair to match exactly what not React Native, what Supabase is looking for. So if we go back and look at the Supabase, and let's edit one of these guys. So let's click edit row. You can see the fields that we need to fill out. We have the name, Wi-Fi, we're doing latitude and longitude later, state and description, and kilowatt, right? Kilowatt installs. So what we're doing is we're making sure that in this JSON object that I'm creating that the names are the same, so I can just pass the object for it to be saved. In the places where it doesn't match, I'm assigning them appropriately here for kilowatt hours and for Wi-Fi for checked. So that's what's going on there. And so I think we've got everything done on this side. So now when the modal is closed, we're going to go back to our home screen. And where is it? Right here. This on close, we're going to change it a little bit because in some scenarios we'll get data back. So let's add a new function here called I think we want to call it handle modal close. And let's go up and create that right here. And here we're gonna, well, first it's gonna need to be async, and we're gonna get the response from the modal. So let's just say it's modal response. And then what's gonna happen here is, the first thing is I'm gonna say let's set show modal to false, because we want to close our modal. And then the next thing we need to do is, if I have some data, so if modal response, then we want to process the data. What we're going to do is we are going to save all this data. So let's put that there, and let's go over to our Supabase client and add some function to support that. And what we want to do is we just going to go in here, export const, call it save charger data, and we'll get passed in our data that we want to save. So this is going to be async, as charger data, DATA, and then let's go back to our awesome Superbase documentation. We can now go to our API, and we want to chargers. We want to save chargers, and filtering insert a row. And so this is what we're going to do. Just copy this. We'll drop it in here. And now let's make the changes to support our data that is coming in. So we have our charger data that's coming in. Also, let's change this. It should be Superbase client from chargers, insert, and then we're just going to take all the charger data that we get and assign it like that. But we want to make sure that all we really care about is an error, so we're going to return error if there's an error. And I think we should be good here. And then now the next up, we need to make sure we pass it back. So save charger data. Save charger data has already been exported. Oh, let's take that out of there. There you go, save charger data. Well, let's go back to my HomeStack. And here we are. Here's where we actually want to save the data now. So const error equals wait, save charger data, and then we're going to pass in the modal response. And what we're going to do is we're going to, if error, then we will an alert. So alert. So we're going to import that, AL alert, error saving charger, and then we'll give the error message. And let's handle our button now. We're going to have one button just signifying we got it, we know we got an error, and then on press we're just going to continue. Alright, so it looks like we have the basics laid out. So that should close it, it should save the data. And let's try and add one. 250 is the fastest. We'll just say there's no Wi-Fi this one. Add charger location. Alright, there's no error, but it did show up. We'll get to that in a second, but let's check to see if we have our data in here. Well, let's go to our tables, chargers, and our test charger got added. Our data came across, and if we, let's see if it gets rendered, let's kind of force React Native to reload. And there's our test charger. But what we want this to do is we want this to show up immediately, and there's a way that you can modify your tables and support subscriptions so we can get updates when they change. But the first thing is let's add the code for the update, and let's move it to a new function in our Superbase client. So we're going to go in here and say const listen for, that's it, listen for charger changes. And then we're going to have a we're going to have a callback. And this function will get called when we detect a change. And the call that you need to make inside of Supabase comes from the Supabase API also. And what we're going to say here is we're going to listen for any changes, because we have the asterisk here, this would be to listen for any changes on chargers. We don't specifically care about what the payload is. All we know is that once we get a change, let's rename this, that makes more sense. Update method gets passed in. So once we get a change, we want to call whatever update method was passed in. And so we also need to pass this back. And let me just show the docs. I've been showing the documentation for everything else, so let's stay consistent. And I believe if I go to chargers and I scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can subscribe to changes to specific rows. You can subscribe to deletes, all these different ones. And we're basically saying let's subscribe to everything. So that's what we're doing. And then the last thing that you need to do to make this work, and we can go back to our little script snippets here, is we need to run this new query here to tell Supabase to listen for changes on this chargers table. So this is the command to do it. Let's run this command. Oh, I already ran it before. So it's already set up to listen for changes. So now let's add another item and see if we get the change to show up I need to add this. So I created the function. Did I put it to my HomeStack? And no, I need to put it in here. So we'll listen for changes in chargers. And then we need a method to call. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to call our load all chargers again. And I think I can just do this. All right. Let's give it a go. So basically what this says, so when this component starts up, I'm going to load all the chargers, but then I'm also going to create this subscription to listen for any more changes to the table. So let's try and add one. And we're going to say this is a low power charger, about 50, but it does have Wi-Fi. So we add the charger. You can see the update and the charger, the data automatically shows here on the table, which is exactly what we wanted. So this is a good place to kind of end this part. Let's see, what else do we have to do? So we have the services. These are real services showing. I think what we want to do next is, so you can see on something like this new charger is actually no services. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through the whole process of kind of duplicating what we just did for adding a modal, except adding chargers, except we'll do the whole UI. We'll add the new functions to our Supabase client. Because right now all we're doing is saving chargers. So we're going to add the save for the notes and save for, let me see what we got here. And notes and check-ins. I don't know if I'll do them all because it's pretty much the same pattern. Maybe I'll just do one of them for the video to give you guys an idea of how it works, and then we'll go on from there. Okay, let's get to that now. Okay, like I said in the last video, what we're going to do now is we're going to follow the same pattern that we did here with this add modal to support these additional services. I'm not going to do them all because the pattern's pretty much the same. I'll probably just do services so you can see how it would be done to add it for notes and for check-ins. So let's see what we're going to base it on. So we're going to base it on what we're doing here on the home page. So if we come into the home page, here's my home screen. So here's my home screen, and as you can see, one of the first things we do is we need to add this little button up in the top corner. So we're going to copy this. We're going to go to our more screens, which is where our services screen should be. Let's see, services detail screen. And right here up at the top, we're going to drop this guy in. Right? And we're also missing our show modal, so let's add that. and it's going to be set to false. Okay, so now this should add our little button. Oh, what's missing? Oh, navigation. Pass in navigation. And then now when I go to my services, well, let's be thorough. All right, add our button. Okay, did we get it this time? Third time to charm, I hope. There we go. So now we want to be able to click the add and pop a little modal up. So now let's go into our, let's put a little header sheet, separate this code, just scrolling through it. All right, here's my render. And what we're going to do is right up here at the top is where we're going to add our modal. Let's just put some comments in here. Okay, so we can kind of separate it. And once again, we will just follow the pattern of what we have over here in our home stack. And so if we go into our home stack, when we look down inside of our code, we have this modal block here. And so we're going to copy this modal block. We'll go to our more screens. We'll drop the modal block in here. We will, can I just do an add modal? I'll be a little bit more specific this time. But what we need is, because this is going to get crowded, maybe I'll show how to refactor this out into a separate file after we get this done. So we're inside of our services detail screen, right? And we need a modal. So let's go to our home stack. And how do we do it here? Item, close. Looks like I just created a completely separate component called add modal. Let's do something similar. So we're going to go over here, and here's our services, and then right here at the top, say const function add services modal. We'll assume we'll get some values. Let's set that up, and then I'm mixing my TypeScript. I'm mixing two different approaches of doing stuff. So let's keep this simple and just do it this way, since that's what everything else is like here. And what we'll do is we're going to pull some stuff from here. So I'm pretty certain I need a name and a description. So we're going to copy name and description, and we're going to set those variables here. And then I go back to my home stack. I know I'm going to need this on save, so let's copy my on save, and we'll put that up top here. But on save, all we need to send back is a name and a description. So that's all we need there. And of course, we need to render something. So we got that. We're going to use pretty much the exact same style here. So I'm going to copy this first part and just take these two, because I know I need two. So let's go over here, and in our return, and now let's wrap this stuff up, because it's missing its card, it's missing its card, and it's missing a view. I think that's it. So add service location. Information that we need is we need a name and we need a description. So actually, let me just go back and copy the description. There it is. Let's copy all this stuff, more screens, and just replace this. And what's it complaining about? Let's try it again. There we go. All right. So I have my name and my description, but now I need my buttons on the bottom. So let's go get my buttons. Scroll down. And is this wrapped in anything? No, it looks like they're just stacked. So let's grab, button. Yeah, let's just grab our buttons and put them right at the end of the card content. Go back to more screens. On save data, add service location, cancel the same thing. Well, actually, let's take a look and see what our screens look like right now. Let's go for more. Okay, modal. So we need to add some imports. Hold on, let's save this. And let's use React Native. We got our modal there. Let's see what else we're missing. More services. Oh, it's not. It's add services modal. So where is it? This should be add services modal. And this is probably going to complain about this on close handle modal close. So let's just put a placeholder in for that. See if that's enough to see our screen. That's where our services. I don't have text input on paper. Let's try again. More services. Add. So now we have our add service location. Our cancel. On close is not defined. All right, yeah, I need to add them up here. So here's our merit modal on close. And it should call on close add services modal. Okay, let's see, why is it not closing it? So on close, oh, handle close modal. So in here, set modal, set social modal false, so that should close it. All right, so we have our modal, our data, and cancel. I think I want to do one other thing to kind of make this cleaner, because like right now I have no idea what location I'm working with. So it'd be nice if we had the location name included in here. The easiest way to probably do that is to just pass it as a parameter. So if we go back to my HomeStack and we look down here, where are my cards? Where we're navigating. Right now we're just passing the charger ID. We could probably throw the whole thing over the fence, but I think that might be a little excessive. So this takes us to our detail screen. So let's see, where is that? That detail screen. In our detail screen, we get the charger data, so we have the whole charger. And then down here, when I'm pressing to go to details, I'm just passing the specific content, but let's pass the name. So for example, we're doing services first. Pressable, so title. So on navigation, I'm passing the services. Let's also pass the name. So now we have the name on the other side. Not sure what I'm going to do with it yet, but I know I need it. So now let's go to my more screens, and I am working on my services detail screen. So here's my services detail screen. Okay. I really just want at the top of my list here. Where's my flat list? Like right here. Let's see if I just do title. So I think I saw a title from paper. See if that gives me something nice. I just want to say right here. So we're pulling the services off, but we're also getting the name. So now let's see if we can just drop the name here and how it looks. Title. I could clean that up a bit, but the idea is I want you to know that we're working in the Delaware Bridge Rest area. So that's what I'm going for with that. Sorry, it's not pretty, but I just thought it was best to give that context. And so now when I do the add, I know that I'm adding a service location, and it's probably for, let's cancel. Actually, let's put it in the modal too. Doesn't make sense if it's not in the modal. Service detail screen. Show modal. See how that looks. Oh, let's just pass it in. I was being lazy. Name. That's the cleanest way to do it. Stop being lazy. Let's take this out. Let's go into my add services modal. And right here, service location, subtitle. Let's just put the name in there. I'll close. Name. All right, who would use the name? Charger name. Let's do that. Okay, and let's go back to services detail screen, and where we load up our modal, we're going to call this charger name. And so we get that underneath there. I think that's a nice touch. Okay, so now we are back to entering our data. So let's get back to our add services modal. We're getting our name and description. This all looks right. Now let's go down to our services detail screen. In our handle close modal, we have to do the same thing as so modal response. And then actually, instead of me trying to figure this out, let me just get to detail screen, add modal. Now it's the home screen. Where do they do it on the save? All right, here. This whole if then right here is what we want. So let's go back and we will just drop it in here. And let's make this async. For modal response, we want to save service data. Error saving service. Load the error, and now we need to add this function save service data. So let's go to our Supabase client, and we're going to copy this also and just build upon it. So this is service data, from services. We're going to save the service data, but what's missing is the ID of the charger that it's associated with. So let's add that onto the end. ARGER. Do I need to do it this way? Let me just pass it over. I'll just pass it as part of the service data. So let's go back to save charger. Let's duplicate it. Save service data. Let's push this out down here. And then let's go back to more screen, save service data, modal response. We want to do more. We need the charger ID, which got passed in. Did it get passed in? Save service detail, name, services. Wow, I just realized I don't have the ID. I guess I need the charger ID too. And so what we're going to do is we are going to just pass in all the modal response data, and then we have the charger ID field, and we will pass the charger ID. And we'll close this out. Let's format this, and then let me explain what's going on. So if we look back at our data for services here, right, you'll see that this is all of our data we've added. This will be added automatically, but we have this charger ID field on the end that's required so that we know which charger this service is associated with. So what we're doing is we first brought over the name as a parameter because we wanted to add the name on the bottom, but I'm realizing that upon saving I need the charger ID, so we need to pass that in too. So now let's go back to my HomeStack and look at this handle modal close. It's not going to be there. It's my detail screen. And then we have these down at the bottom here. We have these buttons. So we already modified this one for charger data name. Here we need charger ID. And then we're going to make that to be charger data.id. Okay, so now we're passing charger ID over. Let's go back to more screens, services detail. We get the charger ID as a root parameter. And then when we save the data, we pass the charger ID along with the rest of the data from the modal to save the service. So let's add this. So let's call this Delaware beef barbecue. Real tasty. And let's add the service location. Let's see, save service data is not defined. Did I not import this guy? Looks like I did not import it. So let's try again. We want that barbecue still, so we're going to call it Delaware BBQ Real Tasty. Okay, let's see if we added it. Let's refresh this. Delaware barbecue, real tasty, timestamp. Why did my charger ID come over? All right, let's take a look and see what's happening there. Service data, charger ID, passing charger ID along with the data. Let's look at save services data. Passing all the data. Did I not pass the ID appropriately? Let's go back up. Maybe the problem's a little bit higher. Let's start here. I think the problem was that it reloaded it, and when it reloaded, it didn't have that parameter. So let's try services, add barbecue, real tasty, add service location. Let's take a look here. Yeah, that's what it is. So what had happened before is I was already on this page, and so the charger ID parameter wasn't passed, and so that's why I didn't have it. So now if I cancel and I go back, and I click more, it should load it, and there we have it. So it's associated with. And I add a little extra stuff here, bringing the name over to put it in the title, and kind of adding it to the top here. But those are just little niceties that make it look a little bit better.